Monica Ellis adjusted the collar of her uniform as the sun crept gently across the manicured lawns of the Whitmore estate. The air in Bel Air had a crisp, early spring sharpness, the kind that made the marble floors of the estate feel colder than they looked. She moved quietly, methodically, like someone who had long learned to be invisible in other people's palaces. From the kitchen to the dining room, Monica's steps were silent, her face composed, her heart steady. Logan Whitmore, 5 years old, was supposed to be finishing his cereal at the long glass table that overlooked the garden. But instead, he sat curled in the bay window with a picture book in his lap, his tousled blonde hair catching the morning light. His little legs swung lazily as he glanced up and smiled the moment Monica entered. "Miss Monica, come see," he called, pointing at a page covered in illustrations of dragons. "This one's like your stories." Monica smiled and walked over, kneeling beside him. "You think so? That dragon looks awfully polite. Mine usually breathe fire if someone forgets their bedtime." Logan giggled, and for a few seconds there was warmth in the cold room, something tender that only children and caretakers understood. Monica loved that boy in the way only someone without their own children can love, with total, undiluted devotion. But that warmth vanished the moment Richard Whitmore's footsteps echoed down the hallway. Richard was not a cruel man, not outwardly, but power shaped his posture, his voice, and even his gaze. He carried himself like a man used to getting answers without asking twice. His charcoal suit was sharp, his watch a small fortune, and his eyes scanned the room not for emotion but for order. He stopped the moment he saw Logan perched beside Monica, still holding the open book. "Logan," he said, "breakfast, now." Logan slipped off the window seat without protest, but his gaze lingered on Monica as he walked to the table. She stood too, smoothing her apron. Richard's attention shifted to the floor-to-ceiling window behind her. Parked in the private driveway just beyond the glass sat the gleaming yellow Lamborghini Huracan, a car so pristine it looked like it belonged in a showroom, not in someone's actual garage. Richard's pride and joy, his obsession. And Monica had accidentally let her cleaning cloth touch the window closest to the car. "Miss Ellis," he said sharply. She turned. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore?" "I've told you before. You are not to touch that vehicle, not to approach it, not to clean near it. That car is a multi-million-dollar asset." Monica's jaw tightened slightly. "Of course, sir. I was only wiping the glass. That glass is less than 3 feet from the vehicle. That's too close. I want to be crystal clear. If I ever find you near that car again, there will be consequences. Understood?" She nodded. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." He didn't wait for anything more. He turned, glanced at his phone, and strode toward the front foyer, already in a different world. His driver was likely waiting, his meetings were stacked, his son's cereal untouched. Monica watched him go, then turned to Logan. The boy had pushed his bowl away and was now resting his head on one arm, face pale. "Logan?" she said, walking to him. "Honey, what's wrong?" His head turned slightly, eyes glassy. "I'm tired," he mumbled. "Hot." She pressed her palm to his forehead, and her stomach clenched. He was burning up, not the kind of warmth from a playful run, but the kind that radiated outward, heavy and wrong. She knelt beside him, brushing back his hair. "Let's get you on the couch, okay?" But as she tried to help him down from the chair, his little body suddenly went slack in her arms. Monica gasped, catching him before he hit the floor. "Logan!" she cried, her heart slamming in her chest. His lips were turning a pale blue. His breathing was shallow, barely there. Panic snapped through her like lightning. She scooped him up, bolting from the dining room toward the grand hallway. The estate felt 10 times bigger when it was empty. No butler, no cook, just her, alone with a child slipping toward death. Monica grabbed the landline. Dead tone. "Of course." She dug into her apron pocket, yanking out her phone and dialing 911. 911, what's your emergency?" The voice was calm, robotic. "It's a child," Monica panted. 5 years old. He's not breathing right. He's burning up. I think it's an allergic reaction or something. Please, he needs help now." The dispatcher took the address and said, "An ambulance will arrive in approximately 12 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes? He doesn't have 15 minutes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That's the current estimated arrival." Monica stood frozen, holding Logan's limp body, staring down the long marble hallway. Then her eyes landed on the Lamborghini. No, she couldn't. She mustn't. She'd lose her job. Richard would never forgive her. She might be arrested, sued, branded a thief, but Logan's head twitched in her arms. A low whimper escaped his throat, the kind that sounded like the end of trying. Monica's decision happened somewhere deeper than thought. Her arms tightened, her legs moved. She bolted toward the front door. The front doors flung open with a sharp creak, and the cool spring air rushed against her face. Monica's heart pounded so fiercely it felt like a drumline in her ears. The yellow Lamborghini shimmered in the sunlight, beautiful, lethal, and completely off-limits. She didn't care. Still holding Logan close to her chest, she sprinted barefoot across the stone steps, her soles slapping against the gravel. The car's fob had been left on the entryway table earlier that morning, a careless habit Richard never changed. And now it was salvation. Monica gently laid Logan on the passenger seat, buckling him in with trembling hands. His skin looked worse up close, ashen, lips purple, eyelids fluttering. Her chest felt as if it might split open from the pressure. "Stay with me, baby," she whispered. She slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like polished leather and cold money. Monica had never driven a car like this in her life. She barely registered the fear anymore. She inserted the fob and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life. The beast woke, and she floored it. The tires screamed across the gravel, kicking up a storm of white dust behind her. The iron gates of the estate began to slide open, too slowly. Monica didn't wait. She gunned the car straight through, just as the opening reached the width of the vehicle, missing the iron sides by inches. She didn't notice the security cameras tracking her every move, didn't hear the buzz of the motion sensors triggering silent alarms. All she saw was the road ahead, and all she heard was Logan's faint, failing breath. Minutes blurred into seconds. Monica weaved through Bel Air's quiet streets like a woman possessed. Her eyes flicked between Logan and the road. Her hands gripped the wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. She took a red light without slowing. Horns blared. She didn't flinch. Logan whimpered again. Monica leaned over, one hand briefly brushing his damp forehead. "You're okay, sweetheart. I got you. Just hold on." She could see the freeway entrance now, but the Lamborghini was twitchy, like an unbroken horse. Every turn required a fight. She barely managed to swerve between two SUVs without clipping their mirrors. Someone shouted. Tires screeched. She didn't look back. Her breath came in gasps. Her apron strap had come undone, flapping against her arm. Sweat trickled down her neck. "God," she whispered, "please don't take him. Please, let me get there." As the freeway opened before her, Monica pressed the pedal harder. The Lamborghini responded with a thunderous growl and shot forward like a lightning bolt. She had no idea what time it was, no idea how many traffic laws she'd broken, no idea that back at the estate, security officer Carl Thompson was staring in disbelief at the monitor showing her speeding away. Nor did she know that Richard had already received a call in the middle of a board meeting and was demanding someone find her and bring her down. All Monica knew was that Cedars-Sinai was 10 minutes away, and Logan might not have 10. She felt a tremor beside her. Logan jerked violently, his little arms spasming, his mouth open but silent. Monica screamed his name, one hand gripping the wheel, the other trying to keep his head still. "Logan! Logan, baby, breathe!" She could see the hospital now, tall, glass-paneled, a gleaming white tower in the sun. Cars clogged the intersection ahead. She didn't care. She yanked the wheel, swerving into the bike lane, then the curb, then into the ER driveway with a jolt that sent the front bumper scraping pavement. Brakes screamed. Smoke plumed. She stopped. Monica flew from the car, yanking open the passenger door. Logan's body fell into her arms like a sack of feathers. "Help!" she screamed, running toward the ER doors. "Please, somebody help! He's not breathing!" Nurses and doctors burst from the doors. A middle-aged nurse with silver curls ran toward her, taking Logan into her arms. "Get a gurney, now!" the nurse shouted to the others. In a blur, Monica watched Logan disappear behind glass doors, surrounded by medics, wires, beeping machines, and then the world stopped. Monica dropped to her knees on the concrete, the roar of the Lamborghini engine still echoing in her ears. Her hands shook violently, her mouth open, but no sound came. Her chest heaved. She had done it. She had gotten him there. But was it enough? A hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Ma'am, turn around. Hands where I can see them." She turned. A police officer stood behind her, his face unreadable, hand on his belt. "What?" "You're under arrest for theft of private property. You have the right to remain silent." Monica didn't hear the rest. Her eyes were locked on the glass doors that had swallowed Logan whole. She whispered one last time, "Please save him." The cuffs had barely clicked shut around Monica's wrists when the ambulance team wheeled Logan out of sight. Her knees ached against the pavement, but she didn't fight the officer. Not really. She just watched. Watched until the boy she loved, like her own, vanished behind the glass doors. The officer tugged her gently to her feet, but firmly. He was young, clean-shaven, likely no older than 30. His expression remained professional, though not cruel. "You're being detained on suspicion of vehicle theft," he repeated as he led her toward the waiting cruiser, its lights still flashing in staccato bursts against the beige hospital walls. "You'll be taken to the precinct downtown for processing." "I didn't steal it," she whispered, her voice cracked from shouting, from panic, from helplessness. The officer didn't respond. Maybe he'd heard that line 100 times. Maybe he believed her. Maybe he didn't care. She climbed into the back of the cruiser, the doors slamming shut behind her with the finality of a jail cell. As the car pulled away, Monica turned her head just enough to look out the side window. She could still see the hospital's glowing entrance, still feel the weight of Logan's tiny body against her arms. His last breath had been shallow, scary, but still there. She had gotten him to the hospital alive. That had to count for something, right? Back at the Whitmore estate, Richard Whitmore stood in his home office, fists clenched at his sides. The video footage had been emailed to his phone in seconds. Surveillance captured every angle of Monica Ellis walking across the gravel drive, placing Logan in the car, starting the engine, and blowing through the estate gates like a bank robber in a heist movie. "Unbelievable," Richard muttered. His assistant, a harried man in his 40s named Jeremy, stood nearby, pale and wide-eyed. "She took the Huracan, sir. Just drove it right out. No hesitation." "She's worked here for 3 years," Richard said, more to himself than anyone else. 3 years, never late, never complained, never touched a single thing that wasn't hers. "Maybe it was an emergency." "That's my child," Richard snapped, his voice cracking. "And she kidnapped him." Jeremy winced, but said nothing. Outside, the buzz of the security team preparing statements to the police filled the estate. Carl Thompson, head of security, was already on the phone with LAPD, giving a report. Richard turned back to the screen, replaying the footage again. He zoomed in on Monica's face as she clutched Logan in her arms, running to the car like the place was on fire. There was fear in her eyes, but not the kind that comes from getting caught. It was something else. Desperation. Terror. Love. Richard exhaled sharply and rubbed his forehead. "She'll face the consequences," he muttered. "Nobody gets away with stealing from me. Nobody." At the downtown precinct, Monica sat in a cold metal chair, wrists still red from the cuffs. A clipboard rested on the table in front of her, untouched. A female officer had offered her water, then left her alone. Nobody yelled at her, nobody called her names, but they didn't listen either. The door creaked open again, and a man in a suit walked in, carrying a notepad and a badge clipped to his breast pocket. He had the weary look of someone who had worked too many cases in too little time. "Ms. Ellis," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Detective Hammond." Monica didn't speak. "I'm told you took Mr. Whitmore's Lamborghini without permission and drove it to Cedars-Sinai. Can you tell me why?" She stared at the table. "He was dying," she whispered. "The boy, Logan. I called 911. They said 15 minutes. I couldn't wait." Detective Hammond scribbled something down. "And Mr. Whitmore didn't give you permission to use the car, correct?" "No, he told me never to go near it. But you did anyway." Monica looked up. Her eyes were tired, but firm. "Wouldn't you?" The detective's pen paused for a beat, then moved again. "We've confirmed that the boy, Logan Whitmore, was admitted to the ER in critical condition. That matches your story. But it's not my call whether or not charges are pressed." "So I could go to jail for saving his life?" she asked, voice cracking. "You could," he replied evenly, "but it depends on what Mr. Whitmore decides." Monica leaned back in her chair, a wave of exhaustion crashing over her. She had never been arrested in her life, never had a parking ticket, never even raised her voice at work. Now she was sitting in a station cell, wearing handcuffs and a uniform stained with tears. She whispered, "I didn't do it for me." The detective didn't reply. He just closed his notepad and stood. Hours passed. Monica wasn't sure how many. No clocks in the holding room, no updates, no windows, just cold steel, fluorescent lights, and the ache in her chest where Logan's head had rested. She prayed, silently, over and over again. Not for herself. She didn't care what happened to her anymore. All she wanted was for Logan to live. Just live. A loud knock startled her. The door opened. Carl Thompson stepped inside, flanked by a uniformed officer. His presence was intimidating, but his face wasn't cruel. It was unreadable. "Monica," he said, "you need to come with us." "Am I being charged?" "No," Carl said flatly. "But Mr. Whitmore wants to speak with you." Her stomach twisted. Is Logan okay?" Carl's eyes shifted. He didn't answer. The black SUV pulled up in front of Cedars-Sinai's west entrance. Carl opened the door, but Monica didn't wait. She stepped out and scanned the windows above. Her heart thudded like war drums. Richard Whitmore stood by the glass doors inside the main lobby, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He was surrounded by security and staff, but his eyes were fixed solely on her. She walked toward him, her back straight, her apron still wrinkled, her hair messy, but she didn't lower her gaze. "Mr. Whitmore," she said softly. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, finally, "He's alive." Monica gasped. Her knees nearly buckled. "He's stable," Richard added. "Doctors say it was anaphylactic shock. Something he ate this morning, cereal with nuts. He has a severe allergy I didn't even know about." Monica's eyes welled. "Oh, my God." "The doctors said," Richard continued slowly, "that if you hadn't brought him in when you did, he'd be dead." Monica wiped her eyes quickly. "I didn't mean to take the car. I mean, I did, but it wasn't about the car." Richard held up a hand. "I watched the footage." She froze. "I saw the whole thing. You carried him out like your own child. You didn't even hesitate." He stepped closer, his voice lowered. "You broke every rule I gave you. You disobeyed my direct orders. You stole a car worth more than most people make in a decade." Monica's breath caught. "And I owe you everything." She blinked. "What?" "I've spent years surrounding myself with people who follow orders," he said. "Not many who question them, and none who'd risk prison to save my son." He paused, then added, "So no, you're not being charged." Monica swayed slightly. Her legs had stopped working right. "I thank you." He studied her. "I don't thank people often," he said, "but I'm not just thanking you." He extended a business card. "Tomorrow morning, press conference. I want you there." She looked down at the card. It was embossed in silver. Whitmore Global, Executive Media Relations. "Press conference?" she asked. "I'm going to tell the world what you did, and I want them to hear it from you too." Monica's voice was barely audible. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." That night, Monica sat by Logan's hospital bed. He was asleep now, breathing steady. A nurse had allowed her to stay after hours. No cameras, no guards. Just her and the little boy who had changed everything. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "You scared me, kiddo," she whispered, "but we made it." The monitors beeped softly. Outside, the LA skyline shimmered in the dark. Monica didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know what the cameras, the press, or Richard's circle would say. But for now, she was here, and Logan was alive. That was enough. The hallway outside the pediatric ICU smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Monica Ellis sat on the edge of a cold metal bench, her hands folded in her lap, wrists still marked with faint red lines where the cuffs had been. Her clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was falling out of its bun. But none of that mattered. Inside the room behind the glass, Logan Whitmore slept peacefully under soft hospital lighting. His chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm, a tangle of wires taped gently to his skin. Machines beeped quietly beside him. The worst had passed. But Monica wasn't free. The click of polished shoes on the hospital floor made her look up. Richard Whitmore was walking toward her, alone this time, no security, no assistance, just the weight of something heavy behind his eyes. He stopped in front of her and studied her face. For the first time, he didn't look like the man who owned half of California. He looked like a father. "They said he's stable," he said quietly. Monica nodded, her voice thin. "They said he'll make a full recovery." Richard rubbed his jaw. "You didn't call me." "There wasn't time." He didn't respond right away. His gaze shifted to Logan, then back to her. "You knew I'd be furious." "Yes. And you took the car anyway." "I didn't think about the car, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice tight. "I thought about Logan turning blue in my arms." He exhaled sharply and sat beside her on the bench. "I don't know what to do with this," he admitted. "You broke into my garage, stole my most valuable possession, but you saved the only thing I actually care about." Monica looked at him. "Then maybe you know what matters now." Richard didn't answer. He stared ahead, as if the hallway tiles had started speaking in some language only he understood. "I watched the footage again," he said finally. "You were scared. I saw it in your face. But not because you were doing something wrong. You were terrified for him." Monica didn't move. "He's like family to me, Mr. Whitmore. Maybe more than that." Richard turned to her, his voice quieter. "Why didn't I see that before?" She looked away. "You weren't looking." They sat in silence for a moment. Nurses passed by. Somewhere down the hall a child coughed, and the sound echoed sharp in the quiet. Then Richard stood. "The media's already sniffing around. Someone leaked the footage." Monica's stomach dropped. "What?" "Security footage. Of you, the car, the hospital. It's on 2 local news stations already. They're calling you a thief. A kidnapper." Her breath caught. "They think I kidnapped him?" He didn't answer that directly. "It's spinning fast. I can stop it, or I can let it run wild." Monica's eyes locked with his. "So which is it?" Richard hesitated. Then, "Tomorrow I'll fix it. But tonight, there's still fallout. The LAPD is holding paperwork. You're not formally charged, but you're not cleared either. So I'm still branded a criminal. For now." He handed her a small card. It wasn't one of his usual gleaming business cards. This one had only a name, a time, and an address. Whitmore Headquarters, 10 a.m. Media Room B. "What is this?" "A press conference," he said, "tomorrow. I'm going to tell them everything." Monica looked down at the card, then back up. "Are you sure that's wise?" "No," he said, but it's right." Back at the Whitmore estate, Carl Thompson stared at the flood of comments pouring into the company's media inbox. "Your maid stole your Lamborghini? Wait, she saved your kid and still got arrested? Classic. Black woman saves rich white boy and gets cuffs instead of thanks." Carl rubbed his temples. The team couldn't keep up. Richard hadn't responded to any requests yet. Legal was on edge, the board was buzzing, and Gerald Matthews, one of Whitmore's oldest partners, had already emailed Richard 3 times. "This could cost us millions. I don't care what she did. Fire her now. Damage control, Richard, not charity." Carl sighed. This was going to be a storm. At the hospital, Monica didn't sleep that night. She sat in a chair beside Logan's bed, watching him breathe. Once he stirred, opened his eyes, saw her, and gave a tiny, tired smile. "I knew you'd stay," he whispered. "I always will." And as the lights dimmed in the pediatric ICU, the world outside spun fast and unforgiving. Social media flooded with rumors. Talk shows debated her name. Strangers painted her as a hero, or a criminal, or both. But inside that small, quiet room, none of it mattered. Only one thing mattered. He was still alive. Nicholas Harrington stood motionless in front of the glass window, his gaze locked on the frail figure of his son lying on the hospital bed. Ethan's tiny body was hooked up to tubes and machines, his chest rising and falling with the aid of a ventilator. For the first time in years, Nicholas felt powerless. The empire he had built, the wealth he had amassed, it all meant nothing now. Behind him, the quiet footsteps of Dr. David Bennett echoed down the sterile hallway. "Mr. Harrington," the doctor said gently, "your son is stable, but the situation is critical. If he had arrived even 5 minutes later, we might have lost him." Nicholas closed his eyes. The words struck him like a blade. 5 minutes. That was all that stood between life and death. And it had been Grace Williams, the woman he had just condemned. Who had saved Ethan? He turned slowly to face the doctor. "You said she saved him?" Dr. Bennett nodded, his expression calm but firm. "Yes, she brought him in herself, drove him straight to the emergency entrance. From what the nurses told me, she was frantic, crying, begging us to help. She stayed until the moment the police arrived." Nicholas felt a sudden tightness in his chest. He had ordered her arrest, had her handcuffed, treated her like a criminal. "I need to see her," he whispered. Grace sat alone in a quiet corner of the hospital's security waiting area. Her hands rested on her lap, wrists still sore from the earlier cuffs. She hadn't asked for a lawyer. She hadn't made a phone call. She just sat, waiting, praying, hoping the silence meant Ethan was still breathing. The door creaked open, and she didn't bother looking up. She expected another nurse, another officer, but it was Nicholas. He stepped in slowly, almost cautiously, like he wasn't sure if he had the right to be there. Grace glanced up, eyes red from tears but steady. "Mr. Harrington," she said, voice even. Nicholas didn't speak at first. He studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not just the uniform, not just the job, but the person. The woman who had held his son in her arms and risked everything. "I was wrong," he said finally, voice raw. "About you. About all of it." Grace said nothing. "I watched the video, the panic on your face, the way you ran. You didn't hesitate, not once." "I didn't have time to think," she said quietly. He nodded. "And I didn't think at all. I saw you as less, someone I hired, someone who should stay in her place. I judged you by everything that doesn't matter." Grace's lips pressed together. "You told me if I ever crossed the line, I'd be gone." He looked down. "I did." A long pause hung between them. Then Nicholas took a breath and stepped closer. "You saved my son's life, Grace, and I had you arrested." "I would have done it again," she said, "even if I ended up in jail. Ethan he's not just your son. He's a little boy who needed someone. I was the only one there." Nicholas's eyes glistened. For the first time in decades, tears pushed their way to the surface. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so damn sorry." Grace looked away, blinking hard. "I'm not asking for anything." "I know," he said, "but I'm going to give you something anyway." He pulled a small key from his pocket and gently placed it on the table between them. "It's the key to the guest house. You're not just a maid anymore. You're family, starting today." Grace stared at the key for a long time. Her fingers didn't move to touch it. Not yet. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "I didn't do this for a job or a house or—" Her voice caught. "I did it because I love that boy, and because he needed someone." Nicholas stepped back, rubbing a hand over his face. "And that's exactly why you deserve more than I ever gave you." Silence stretched between them again, thick with truth, heavier than guilt. Finally, Grace reached for the key. She didn't pocket it. She just held it loosely in her palm, like it might dissolve if she gripped it too tightly. Nicholas took a slow breath. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "I'm going to tell the whole world who you really are." Grace blinked, confused. "What?" "A press conference," he said. "National. Live." Her heart skipped. "Mr. Harrington." "Nicholas," he corrected gently. She hesitated. "Nicholas, you don't have to do that." "I do," he said, "because for once in my life, I'm going to make things right." She looked down at the key again, and for the first time since this nightmare began, a faint glimmer of peace crossed her face. Nicholas turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You were the only one who saw him. Not as a project, not as a future legacy, not as a Whitmore, just as a scared little boy." He looked over his shoulder. "And you're the only one who ever saw me, too." He stepped out into the hall. Grace sat in silence for a long time. Outside the window, the sun had begun to rise. The ballroom at the City Center Hotel in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with murmurs and flashes. Reporters and cameramen pressed close, their microphones like talons ready to latch onto the unfolding narrative. Every seat around the long dais was filled, the tension in the air thick as the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows. Richard Whitmore stood at the podium, wearing a dark suit and a tight expression. He cleared his throat, scanning the sea of faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began in measured tones, "I stand before you today to address recent events involving my son and a dear member of my household." A hush fell. "On the morning of April 25th, my 5-year-old son, Logan, suffered a severe allergic reaction. He was minutes away from death." His voice cracked. He paused. Behind him sat Monica Ellis. Her hands folded quietly in her lap. Her eyes didn't meet the cameras. They were fixed on a still window. But thanks to one person, everyone called her a maid. But I now realize she is so much more. Monica Ellis was there when no one else was. The cameras flashed again. She brought my son in, risked everything, her reputation, her freedom, to get him help. He took a breath. "I judged her. I had her arrested. But today I want to say this publicly. I was wrong." A ripple of chatter spread through the room. "I mistakenly saw her through the lens of my assumptions, her background, her social standing. I failed to see her as a human being with extraordinary courage and love." Another pause. "So today it is my honor to introduce Monica Ellis, not just as our son's dedicated caregiver, but as the founder and CEO of the Monica Ellis Foundation." Shock and murmurs rose across the room. Richard continued, "This foundation will support first aid and emergency training for domestic workers everywhere, because heroes come in many forms, and they deserve recognition." Monica looked at him, then out toward the audience. A reporter raised a hand and called out, "Ms. Ellis, how do you feel about all this?" She stood slowly, stepping to a secondary mic. Her voice gathered strength. "I'm overwhelmed. but I did what anyone in my place would have done. I love Logan, as if he were my own." She paused, looking toward him. "I hope this story shows that compassion and bravery can come from anyone, no matter who they are." The room erupted in applause. Almost immediately, the mood shifted. Some eyes glistened with tears, others nodding, moved. Flashbulbs lit up as she offered a small, genuine smile. Outside, the world was watching. Social media lit up with headlines. From Maid to hero, Monica Ellis saves child, heads new foundation. Millionaire father publicly apologizes, honors maid who saved son. Online commentators praised the story's emotional gravity. Some celebrated the powerful reminder that labels don't define worth. Others called out the systemic biases exposed by the incident. Inside the hall, Monica, offered a brief wave to Richard. No words were needed. She had her dignity back. And so, for many in that room, a true reckoning had begun. The sun peeked through the soft white curtains of a modest but warmly lit apartment in the heart of the city. Grace Williams stood quietly by the kitchen window, her eyes gazing softly at the playground below, where Ethan, now energetic and full of life, ran joyfully with his friends. His laughter floated up like music, a daily reminder of just how precious life was and how far they had come. Grace wrapped her hands around a warm mug of tea. Her journey from invisible housemaid to national hero had been nothing short of miraculous. But as the applause faded and headlines turned to other stories, Grace found herself embracing something deeper than public admiration: peace. Her mornings were no longer filled with scrubbing floors under silent ceilings. Now they were spent preparing Ethan's favorite pancakes, reviewing upcoming initiatives of the Grace Williams Foundation, and sharing breakfast conversations with Nicholas Harrington, who had become more than just Ethan's father. He was her unwavering supporter, her closest confidant, and over time, a true partner in life. Life had found a new rhythm, one built not on wealth or status, but trust, love, and quiet acts of courage. And as Grace took one last sip of tea, she smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she truly felt at home. Later that morning, Grace walked into the office of the foundation that now bore her name. The Monica Ellis Foundation had started as a simple idea, emergency training for domestic workers, but it had grown into something much bigger. They now provided scholarships, community support centers, and a growing network of volunteers across the country. The walls of the foundation office were decorated with crayon drawings from children, thank you letters from caregivers, and photographs of workshops held in small towns Grace had never even heard of. "Morning, Ms. Ellis," called out one of the coordinators, a young Latina woman with a stack of donation forms in hand. "There's a new batch of letters from Baton Rouge. The ladies down there want to start a chapter of their own." Grace smiled warmly. "Let's make sure they have everything they need." She never imagined she'd become a symbol of something larger than herself. She still got nervous when people recognized her at grocery stores, still blushed when someone thanked her in public, but she had accepted it now, not out of pride, but purpose. Back home that evening, Grace found Ethan curled up on the couch, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders and a well-loved stuffed tiger tucked under his arm. "Movie night?" he asked, grinning. "Only if you promise not to fall asleep 10 minutes in." Nicholas entered the room with popcorn, his tie loosened, his usual tension replaced by something lighter, something that looked suspiciously like joy. As the three of them settled in under a shared blanket, Ethan whispered, "Can we watch the dragon one? The one you used to tell me about, Grace?" She chuckled softly. "Of course we can." Halfway through the movie, Ethan fell asleep in her arms, again. Nicholas turned to her, voice low. "You saved him, but you saved me, too." Grace didn't answer right away. She looked down at the boy curled against her chest, his breath steady, his hand resting on hers. "You saved yourself," she whispered. A few weeks later, Grace stood at the edge of a small community park in Pasadena, where the foundation was hosting its first Family Safety Day. Families gathered under colorful tents, Children ran between CPR demo booths and first aid stations. Local volunteers handed out flyers and small first aid kits. It was simple but beautiful. A local news anchor approached with a camera crew. "Miss Ellis, just one question," he asked gently. "When you think about everything that's happened, what's the one thing you've learned?" Grace looked over at Ethan, who was teaching another little boy how to check a pulse on a teddy bear. Then to Nicholas, who was helping set up tables with the volunteers. She smiled. "That anyone can be a hero," she said. "You don't need a title or a degree. You just need to care enough to act. That's what family is. That's what community is." The camera clicked off. And for the first time, no one called her a maid, or a criminal, or even a hero. They just called her Monica. And that was more than enough. There's something timeless about a quiet act of courage. Like the moment Monica stepped into that hospital, not as a maid, not as a suspect, but as a woman who refused to let a child die on her watch. Her story, from being dismissed to being honored, is not just about a stolen car or a race against time. It's about dignity reclaimed, about what happens when love outweighs fear. And when a voice once ignored finally gets heard. She didn't shout to be noticed. She didn't fight for credit. She simply acted. And in doing so, she became a mirror for us all, especially those within the Black community, who know too well what it means to be judged before being known. Monica's journey reminds us that the measure of a person is not found in what they own, but in how they show up when no one's watching. The lesson here is as old as time. Stand for what's right, even when it costs you. Hold your head high, even when others try to drag you low. Because sometimes justice comes not through noise or fame, but through quiet conviction, steady hands, and a heart that refuses to look away. And for the Black community, this story echoes deeper, a reminder that the strength we've carried through history still shines through ordinary moments of grace. Like a lighthouse in fog, one kind act can light the way for 100 others. Monica didn't just save a child. She reminded us that courage, when rooted in love, has a way of shifting the world. And through the foundation that now bears her name, she's helping others in the Black community rise with her, proving that healing can come even from places once bruised by injustice. So maybe take a quiet moment today to think about those around you who show up, not for applause, but because it's the right thing to do. Look past titles, past uniforms, past assumptions. You never know who might be the one to carry you through the fire. And if this story stirred something in you, consider sharing it with someone who may need reminding that hope often wears humble shoes. That kindness, even when overlooked, has the power to transform lives. Because in the end, what we carry forward isn't just the lesson, it's the light.